There is an important distinction that compliance professionals need to internalize: the difference between law and guidance. Directives and regulations are law. They are binding. Non-compliance has legal consequences. Guidance is different. It is produced by regulators and supervisors to explain how the law should be interpreted and applied. It is not technically binding in the same way, but in practice, it functions as a standard. When a supervisor examines your institution, they will assess your policies and controls against the published guidance. Deviating from these standards requires clear documentation and thorough justification to ensure full regulatory alignment. The European Commission's primary guidance output is the supranational risk assessment, a comprehensive evaluation of money laundering and terrorist financing risks affecting the EU's internal market. This is a document that compliance professionals should know well. It identifies high-risk sectors at the EU level, threats crossing national boundaries that require coordination beyond any single member state. Under 4 AMLD, this was required every 2 years. The 6th directive changed that cadence significantly. Under 6 AMLD, the next assessment is due by mid-July 2028 on a 4-year cycle. Starting in 2030, the new AMLA will issue public opinions every 2 years, providing an additional layer of scrutiny. The Commission also produces delegated regulations, binding technical acts that ensure uniform implementation across all member states without separate national legislation. Europol produces a different category of output, not regulatory guidance in the traditional sense, but criminal threat intelligence that informs how the regulatory guidance is shaped and how obliged entities understand the threat landscape. There are 3 flagship publications you need to know. The first is the Serious and Organized Crime Threat Assessment, known as the SOCTA. This covers the full spectrum of organized crime threats facing the European Union, including money laundering typologies, criminal networks, and sectors they exploit. The second is the iOCTA, the Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment, which focuses specifically on cybercrime, online fraud, and dark web activity. This is increasingly relevant to AML as cryptocurrency and cyber-enabled fraud dominate the typologies being reported by FIUs. The third is the EU Terrorism Situation and Trend Report, known as the EU TESAT, which provides the analytical foundation for understanding terrorist financing risk. All 3 are publicly available and are referenced by supervisors and regulated entities alike when building or reviewing AML risk frameworks. Beyond those 3 flagship reports, Europol also produces focused threat assessments targeting specific crime types: migrant smuggling, intellectual property-related crimes, environmental crime, and others. These are worth knowing because they directly inform the typologies that national risk assessments draw on and supervisors use. Here is the practical implication for a compliance professional when you are calibrating your monitoring scenarios. The threat assessments from Europol tell you what the regulator believes the criminal threat landscape looks like. An institution whose scenarios bear no relationship to that picture will struggle to explain that gap in an examination. The question a supervisor will ask is not, "Do you have transaction monitoring?" The question is, are your monitoring scenarios calibrated to the actual threats identified in the available intelligence? That demands that compliance professionals engage seriously with what Europol and the Commission are publishing. The European Banking Authority is the most prolific producer of technical AML guidance in the EU. Its outputs fall into 2 main categories: regulatory technical standards and guidelines. These are not the same thing, and the distinction matters. Regulatory technical standards are quasi-legislative. Drafted by the EBA and endorsed by the Commission, once adopted they become binding in the same way as the regulations they supplement. They fill in technical detail that the directives and regulations deliberately left open. Guidelines are different. They are not formally binding, but authorities and institutions must make every effort to comply. In practice, they are near binding. A supervisor will treat non-compliance with guidelines as a significant deficiency unless there is clear justification. Both RTS and guidelines can be joint with other European authorities or standalone. Joint outputs are vital as money laundering risk cuts across all financial sectors. Let's look at the specific EBA guidance outputs most relevant to day-to-day compliance and the CAMS examination context. For EBA guidelines are most directly relevant. Know them by name. The first covers risk-based supervision. While addressed to supervisors, it helps you understand how your institution will be examined. The second is guidance on remote customer onboarding solutions, defining what is acceptable as digital identity verification becomes standard. The third defines officer roles and responsibilities, specifying expectations for seniority, independence, and reporting lines. Finally, the risk factors guidelines walk through each sector, providing the analytical vocabulary you need for your own risk assessments.
EURECA, the European Reporting System for Material AML and CFT Weaknesses, is a central reporting mechanism through which national supervisors share information about significant deficiencies in supervised institutions. If a significant deficiency is found in one member state, EURECA enables other supervisors to check whether the same institution has similar weaknesses in their jurisdiction. It addresses the fragmentation that allowed major banking scandals to persist. 4 sets of RTS were released in March 2025, pending AMLA's deployment. They represent the transition from EBA leadership on AML technical standards to AMLA leadership, expected to complete by end of 2025. France provides the most detailed national guidance picture in the curriculum. 4 distinct bodies, each producing different types of output. COLB produces the national risk assessment and sectoral risk assessments, intelligence products that underpin all other French guidance. AMF produces thematic guidelines for investment firms and asset managers. TRACFIN produces joint AML CFT guidelines for all obliged entities, grounded in what the FIU is actually seeing from the STRs it receives. It also publishes information letters to update the sector on emerging typologies and reporting expectations. The ACPR produces 2 categories of output: formal instructions for obliged entities and thematic AML CFT guidelines. Both carry significant supervisory weight. ACPR instructions are not suggestions. They define the specific procedures and reporting obligations that supervised institutions must follow under French AML law. Thematic guidance is often triggered by examination findings. When the ACPR identifies a pattern of weakness across institutions, it publishes guidance to address it at sector level. That guidance is a signal of where enforcement will focus next. Think about guidance as a hierarchy. Supranational risk assessment at the top, Europol intelligence alongside it, EBA standards 1 level down, and national guidance translating everything into jurisdiction-specific expectations. At the bottom of the hierarchy, your institution's own policies, procedures, and controls, which must be calibrated to everything above them. The compliance professional's job is to read the full stack and build practice that is coherent across all of it. From the supranational risk picture all the way down to the transaction monitoring scenario running in your system today, the connection must be traceable. That traceability is what examiners look for, and it is what makes compliance defensible.